Hi, everyone. This is Mickey Hudson. Welcome to today's live broadcast. Come on in, have a seat. We are going to discuss tips and tricks today. So I know that you're seeing a lot of clothes behind me, garments and stuff like that, but not to worry. Although I am addressing a lot of clothing techniques, they all cross over into my crafts, my quilting, my bag making, etc. So I just tend to show the garment technique because it's kind of something everybody can identify with. But everything crosses over into everything else. So I'm happy to answer questions as usual. But here we go. Let's get started. So for those of you that do make bags or quilts or even garments, my number one time-saving tool is my binding attachment. So I'm not going to pull it out and I'm not going to demo it. I'm just going to mention it because I do have a really nice video on the quilt binder. So if you look at Mickey Hudson quilt binder, you can find that video. But as you can see, I use it for hems, I use it for pocket tops, etc. So it's a great little trick if you want to kind of skip a hem. You can just throw it in the binding attachment and do a whole bunch of it. Okay, so I do love it. And if you're a quilter, it will make putting on a binding so much easier. So the number one thing too that I recommend is for any project that I do where I tend to try and cut out everything the day before I want to sew, and just get everything ready, because then when I get up in the morning, it's like I had little elves come and do everything for me. I'm just ready to sit and sew, because just let's face it, the prep work is not our favorite part. So what I do is I will get everything cut out and I will just go ahead and label everything. So I will label all of my little pieces. I will get the thread ready. I will get everything fused, any stabilizer I need, anything like that. And I would just get everything ready and I just roll it up with the thread in there and everything I need. And then I'm just ready to grab it and go. And especially if I'm going to be making more than one, I can just go ahead and cut everything. So it's kind of like assembly line. So I used to do custom clothes for hire, and I made men's clothes. I made men's shirts and stuff like that. And they could get a discount if they bought more than one, because you can cut 5 of something just as easy as you can cut 1 of something. And so I will often do that. If I have a favorite bag or I have a favorite craft item or I have a favorite piece of clothing, if I'm going to cut it, I will go ahead and just stack cut a few of them at one go. And then I just bundle them up. I get the thread, anything I need for it, and I will just bundle it up so that then I'm ready to sit and sew whenever I get a chance. And it really is like little magic fairies. Got it all ready for me. Okay. So any questions about that? All right, because I know this is not a new. So some of you are seeing this little guy here behind me too. This is another thing that I do with my favorite patterns. So the patterns that I'm going to use a lot, and I have some kids clothes. So like if I get invited to a baby shower, I will just make a couple in each side from like 1 to 5, just cut them all out at once. If I have the favorite jacket pattern, etc. And what I do is I will trace out my pattern onto what's called oak tag. Now this, what you're seeing behind me here, this is poster paper. It's not the same weight, but oak tag, just like the mighty oak tree, and tag, like tag your it, is like the manila envelope or the manila folders. So it's a thick, kind of a, not quite cardboard, but it's thick like poster board, and I will trace patterns onto this. So I have my favorite bag patterns and stuff like that just traced to this. And what is so great is then you can just lay these down, and they rotary cut around really, really nice. Or if you're one of those that likes to trace and then rotary cut, you can do that too. But this saves me so much time. And especially if you like to mix and match pieces, which I tend to do. You know, if I want this pocket on that project or this sleeve on that shirt, it makes it really easy just to switch and switcheroo. So, everybody good? All right. I want questions, so please ask me questions. Or let me know if you've seen me recently in an event. I do remember you guys. So I have my little list of things I want to talk about. So another thing when it comes to saving time, and I do this quite a bit, and this is my favorite thing to do when it comes to marking. So we have all these pattern pieces that sometimes need marking, and whether it be clothing or crafts or quilts, etc. Now, when I have a quilt, that marking is a little bit different. But for bags and most crafts and for clothing, we have these little marks. Sometimes there's darts, sometimes there's piecings, sometimes there's notches so that we can line things up. And often when you see, you know, like a what I call the Fab Four, Vogue, Simplicity, Butterick, and McCall's, they will often have these kind of little marks here for our notches. And back in the old days, we're seeing it less and less. But back in the old days, they used to be marked this way. So you'd have these, and people would come and cut, and then they would cut, and they would cut, and they would cut. And hey, Judy, woohoo! So yeah, so Judy saw me when I was in Fort Worth, Texas, and yeah, we had a good time. So what's happening, why you're seeing this less and less, is because more and more people are using rotary cutters. And that's my belief anyway. I don't have it written down anywhere, but I do honestly think that's why we're seeing it fewer and fewer. And for those of you who are not using rotary cutters to cut out your clothing and your crafts and all that, if you're not utilizing that rotary cutter to its fullest, you are missing out. Now, when I first started using a rotary cutter for curves and other projects other than just straightforward rotary cutting, like for a quilt, I went and bought a little teeny 28 millimeter rotary cutter because I was scared to death. And once I did a couple where I cut out a few things, I went, oh, this is really cool. And now when I have to pull out scissors for something, it's extremely painful, and I complain the whole time. Give me a rotary cutter because it is so much easier. But let me show you how I clip. So when I have these clips, now this is cut to that oak tag, so I put little marks in there to make it easier. But it will be the same thing. If I'm going to use this guy, it would be exactly the same thing as this. So when I have my little marks ready to go and I've got it all cut out, I will just come and put in little snips. Usually I don't move everything around. I'm flat on the table. And I will just put in little snips like so. Little less than 1/4 of an inch, or just about 1/4 of an inch, just so that it's in my seam allowance. Okay. And I don't want to go farther than the seam allowance. And also, if you'll notice that when I'm cutting, this is a very important little tip. I see this happen all the time in classes, in videos, and it's teachers and everybody, and it makes me crazy, is they'll come in and they'll go, you're going to snip a little 1/4 of an inch snip. Don't do that. Don't put the tip of your scissor any farther than you're willing to cut. Because if you sneeze and you're here, what's going to happen? or if you get a little jerk or you get scared or anything like that, anything can happen. So don't put the tip of your scissors any farther than you're willing to cut. And if you have scissors that will not cut at the point, go get a nice pair of snip scissors that have a nice point, because it will make all the difference. Okay. And then we have, this little case has a dart. So if you were making, stuffed animals or anything like that, you're going to have darts as well. So I have my little snips marked. And then I take my favorite marking tool for marking the holes and the positions. I am getting to the pattern weights. What are the rotary cutters that you shake? I don't know the different kind of rotary cutters that you're talking about. I do have a variety of rotary cutters that I play with, because I'm always trying new ones out. Joanne, I iron freezer paper onto the original pattern. It reinforces them nicely. Yes, so freezer paper has one side that's really shiny, and that shiny side, if you touch it with an iron, it gets tacky enough to press your patterns down. So yes, that is really, really nice. Okay, but what I use for these wonderful markings here, and I have not used chalk for this in eons, and I use old sewing machine needles. So when a sewing machine needle has died, I just take it and set it aside. Because what I will do is I will just come and pop this through all the way through to the other side. Let me get it. And I will do it on both of these. Okay. And as you can see, now I have this nice little mark that I can use. And if I take it over to the iron or give myself a little finger thing, you can see how it goes away. But this is actually meant to be at the base of a dart, so I'm never going to see that anyway. And if you were to look at ready-made clothes, and if you've ever tried to alter a dart in a ready-made clothing, there's actually a hole there, because that's what they do in the factories, is they punch a hole and you line up your little snips with the hole, and you can create that dart. Let me make this guy because he's a little more obvious. But you see how you can see just fine. You line up your snips, you line up your dart. If you need to draw a line, you can do that. However, when I'm sewing, I have two things that I like to do. So before I had a laser, because now I have a laser guidance system, but before I had that, oh, you guys want to see what I'm doing. So before I had that, I would just come and eyeball. And one of the things is, if you want to sew straight, you cannot watch your needle. If you watch your needle, forget about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to watch where I'm headed. And so I'm going to go ahead and watch where I'm headed, which is down here. And then when I get to the point of the tip of the dart where I am ready to run it off, as you can see, I'm kind of rolling this back. I want to kind of hug the shape of my, so this is like a back dart. I want to kind of hug the shape of my bum. And I'm just going to stitch a couple of stitches all the way off. And that will be all I need. I don't need to tie off any stitches, because that is going to make a knot. But if you kind of come off, and I did it here because I'm trying to impress you guys. So let me pop up here. also working around camera equipment. Yes, I am. And I'm going to use that as an excuse when I'm on live. But I will correct this as well, because what will happen is, and I'll show you what I'm doing. Okay. And I'm still doing it because I'm being watched. Let me do this here. I'm going to draw for you. What you want to do is when you are stitching down and you get to the point, when you're stitching down and you're getting to the point, if you go straight, what'll happen is you get kind of a little nipple there. And what a lot of us like to do too is we come in, we'll just go, we're getting a little close, let's make a quick turn, woo! And we get a nipple there. Instead, if when you come down, if you start coming along the edge and kind of create a curve like this, as you come to the edge, you'll end up just stitching way, and what'll happen is it will cover. So when it gets flipped to the right side, it's going over a curved area like your bum, your hips, or in a stuffed animal, it's creating a shape. We don't want little bubbles sticking out. But that's kind of what we're doing, is we're mimicking that shape, and it creates kind of the flat. So we don't get that nipple at the end. See? So it'll lay flat at the end. Okay. All right. But now with the laser, if you have the laser guidance, that also helps. So when I have the laser guidance, I just kind of come here and I line up to the next guy. But again, once I get to this part, then I start kind of, instead of coming straight off, I will start having a couple of stitches come in just along even. Okay. So marking is snips, because I can see that just as well as I can see little cutouts or anything else. And I use my old needles to create my holes. An open weave, something that has a really open weave, is the only time I really can't use this trick. But like I said, once I give it a little steam or just rub it with my fingers, you can see it just goes right away. Cool, huh? All right. All right. The other thing that I like to do is batch sewing. So if you think about like quilters like to do chain stitching, and where they'll sew, two pieces together, and they just keep going until they have a whole pile of these little guys, and then they take them all over to the ironing board. You can do the same thing with your crafts and your clothing and etc. Getting up and jumping to the iron after every seam is very time consuming. So if you kind of think about it going, okay, I have this piece, which is the back, right? I have this piece, which is the back, and I can put the yoke onto this piece, right? And I can do the front pieces and do the plackets on the front pieces, and I can do the hem on this guy, and I can do all this stuff, and then take that whole stack over to the iron, press, and then come back and batch sew again. So yeah, somebody said batch sewing is totally me at Christmas. Yeah, that's the way I do it all the time. Is every time I sit and sew, I will just do all of it at once. So I'm going to get this guy ready. Another thing too is when it comes to seam allowance, and this is really kind of more for the clothing, people who make clothing and use the Fab Four, Vogue, Simplicity, Butterick, McCall's, even Berta falls into that as well. But those patterns all have a 5/8 inch seam allowance. And if so many people that have only used those patterns and tried to make clothes, they have, I see you guys struggling, or I've seen you guys say, I just can't do it because of this, that, and the other. I am a firm believer that you can if you have the right seam allowance. So the rule of thumb, if you're going to take notes, is the only seam allowances that are 5/8 inch are your what they're called fitting seams. So the center front, the center back, and the side seams. So those are your fitting seams, meaning you can let them in or take them out, but those are the only ones that are 5/8. Everything else is a different seam allowance. So like sleeve cut, anything that's going to be top stitched. So sleeves, the bottoms of yokes, shoulders, etc. Those are all going to be 3/8 of an inch. And anything that's going to be completely enclosed, like collars and cuffs, those or plackets in the front, those are 1/4 of an inch. Because, for instance, if you put in a collar at a 5/8 inch seam allowance, what is the very next thing the instructions tell you to do? Cut it down to 1/4 of an inch. Not only is sewing in a collar at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance so much easier than sewing at a 5/8, it eliminates the need to cut it. So what do I do if I have a 5/8, if I have a Vogue, Simplicity, Butterick, or McCall's? So one of the things that I do is I've never really sweat actually measuring that perfect 1/4 of an inch. I just need the 1/4 of an inch. And it has never, ever affected my size. Your seam allowances are your tape measures, the little regular all-purpose that you get at the chain store or anywhere else. It's the cheapest ones you can buy. These are 5/8 inch wide. So what I will do is I will just come and I will just lay it down and trace my little line. And then when I go and I rotary cut, I will just cut right down the center. So that will be my new seam allowance. So whether it's a 3/8 or a 1/4 of an inch, doesn't matter. It has never affected my size, but it does affect the quality of my sewing. So I'm a big fan of that. If you have one of those big 160 inch quilting tape measures, those are not the ones I'm talking about. I'm talking about the little ones that go to about 60 inch and they're 5/8 inch wide. So it's very cool. All right. Does everybody kind of get what's going on with that when I talk about that? So if you were to use more of the independent pattern companies, a lot of them have the variable stitch seam allowances. So it'll say, the seam allowances are this, that, the other. And you kind of have to pay attention because it's like the side seams are 5/8, the next seam is a 1/4 inch. So they're bouncing you around, and that's the way it should be. But the Fab Four, I call them, they need a prep beforehand. But I guarantee you it is so going to be worth it. The quality of your seams are going to improve tenfold, I promise. So it's pretty amazing. Okay. And also when I do my sewing, you're welcome. Yeah, because it is a great little tip. So when I do my regular sewing and stuff, sorry about that. My most used foot for all my construction, my quilting, all that kind of stuff is my adjustable 1/4 inch foot. Let me turn off my laser because I can sew a 5/8 inch seam. I can sew a 1/4 of an inch seam. So when I come to my foot here, it has all these little marks on it. So the inside of the toe is 1/8 of an inch. So that's kind of your edge stitching. The outside of the toe is 1/4 of an inch, and this big flange here, that's 3/8 of an inch. And it's the same with these lines. This is where my needle mark is. Got 1/8 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch. I've got 1/8 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch. And I've got 3/8 of an inch at the front. So it's awesome for turning corners, for any kind of top stitching where I don't want to fuss, because I use all these little guides all the time. So it's very, very handy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and sew this yoke only because I'm going to do something with it later. And I want to show it to you. So this is going to be at a 5/8 inch, or excuse me, a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So I'm running right along the edge of my foot, the big flange on my foot. Yeah, so a lot of people too, if you're going to, like I used to do that with my custom clothing customers. So I would make a 1-inch seam allowance just because it would allow me more playroom. You will find a lot of like bridal outfits and stuff have bridal and prom and all that kind of stuff tend to have the bigger seams because it gives them more room for adjustment. So it is really cool. All right. So now what I want to do is I'm going to try and change this again. Because one of the things when it comes to top stitching, now again, normally I would give this a little press. We're going to go just for the sake of this deal. But one of the things when I do top stitching, technically I can use my 1/4 of an inch, but if I want to make things a little easier on myself, you've heard the adage, having the right tool for the job. This is really true here because there are 3 different feet that I feel are a must-have in every single sewing kit. And that is the edge stitching foot. So this has a blade, a guiding blade on the side. There's the edge joining foot, which has a guiding blade in the center. And this is the left edge top stitching foot. Okay. With these 3, I can top stitch anything to perfection. And so let me show you here. I'm going to go ahead and show you this little guy here. This is going to be my left edge top stitching foot. Oops, I don't have, it's not fit for the IDT yet. But I am going to come at this side so that you can see how this works. So this is when I want to stitch. Let me get back in here so you can see. Because this is a cool foot. But this is the left edge top stitching foot. So as you can see, if I look underneath, there's a little, it's like bi-level. So this is where my heavier seam will sit on the right side and the single layer of fabric will sit on the left side. And you see the little guide here? That's going to ride right against that little seam line there. So I'm going to go ahead and put this down. And I'm going to pretend like we have stitched it, and I literally cannot see what I'm doing. So I'm looking at my monitor to try and see what I'm doing. And I'm looking at my monitor, and I can't really see what I'm doing. All right. But take a look at this top stitching here. Isn't this gorgeous? Look how beautiful this is. Ooh, ah, wow. So let's say I wanted to do it again and I wanted to have, um, like the double row. So this is where the other feet come in to handy. So I'm going to go ahead and put in my edge stitching foot. And so now I can, let me pop this in here again. But see how I can get this exactly into the position I want. I can position the needle. This is a little wide. So I'm going to come over here to my, not there, this is just not going to let me do it. Okay. So when I have, so pardon the angle, I just can't get it straight and get the angle I need. But one of the things here is I can change my position of my stitch. So if I change this position here, you're going to see it up here. It's moving. So we can do that with quite a few of the Husqvarna Vikings from way back on down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find this into a position that I like. And once again, I'm just going to ride this seam right along that little guide there. But look how beautiful this stitches. And one thing I want you to notice too, this is a nice Italian weight shirting cotton left over from my custom days. And Cheryl, yeah, I did that too for so many years. That's how you get everything. So when something new comes out, I just have to purchase the new versus I just, for many years, it was like, what do you want for Christmas? I want a gift certificate to my local dealer, or I want these feet. So I ended up getting things that way. But look how beautiful that is and how nice and straight. So if you like to do a lot of top stitching for anything, for clothing, for bags, for quilts, for anything like that, I really recommend these feet. And like I said, the edge stitching and the edge joining, they kind of play in tandem because sometimes I need to have that needle in a position and the blade is in a wrong position. So having both of these feet, one with the blade in the center and one with the blade at the side, are great. And having the left edge top stitching, I use these again for clothes, crafts, and quilts. So I use them a lot. And if you've ever been to one of the events where I'm at, or Karen Charles, because we tend to do the same kind of technique, where we do the quilt as you go, you have seen this where we join our batting together by using the edge joining foot. Okay. So what do you guys think of that so far? Ooh, ah, wow. All right, I'm going to put my 1/4 inch foot back on. So another thing too is I know that many of you guys have used the burrito technique when it comes to pillowcases and stuff like that. The burrito technique actually started with clothing back in the 70s. And this is a great example of it. So if you have ever done the burrito technique with a pillowcase, if you think about something that's going to be enclosed, kind of think about how can I do it in one sweep? Because I do that quite often. If it wants me to stitch and then come back and stitch it by hand, I'm not doing that. I will often think, how can I fold this so that I can stitch it both at once and then flip it right side out? And this is a great example of this. So this is, this originally came from Islander sewing systems techniques, but this is kind of one of those, it has become kind of a staple and more people are doing it everywhere, but it is originally an Islander sewing system. So what I'm going to do is I've got my back piece here, and I'm going to lay my next piece down. I had this marked, but obviously I used a nice disappearing ink because it went away. But I've got my right sides together. So this is the right side of my back, and this is the right side of my front, and I'm putting my seams together. Now, what the Fab 4 wants us to do is it wants us to sew these together, give it a press, and then press this and hand stitch that in. I don't think so. I'm not going to do any hand sewing. And in case you don't know how serious I am, I would rather clean the toilet with my head. I do not like hand sewing. I can do it, but I don't like it. All right, so I'm going to put these two together because this is how I would normally sew it, right? So this is how it would normally get sewn, but I got to sew this into it as well. So this, I'm going to roll this in just like you could do that pillowcase or anything like that. And then I'm going to bring this around and stitch these together now. What did I do that I always do when I'm doing a live event? Because I do not do this when I'm home alone, when I'm sewing alone, I remember. But I do it every time I do a live event. Almost every time. So I'm going to set my needle back. And that one is dead. I think I'm just going to have to start. So in the settings here, you can come in, not temporary border, I want temporary sewing. You can come in here and put on stitch width safety. And I think from now on, I think I'm going to start doing that so that I don't, because I've done it, I've broken needles on camera so many times. I just get excited to show you everything. All right. So let me lay this back out again and get myself back into position. So I'm going to put these right sides together. There's my other sleeve. I'm going to kind of hold on to it nice and tight and burrito that, put all that yummy goodness of the shirt inside and bring these together. So the right sides of the yoke are together with that front piece sandwiched in between. So you can use pins, you can clips, etc. I do not use pins. And that's not a snob thing. There's industrial shortcuts that you can learn how to do. And that's how I learned how to do those. And that will really save you some time. Oh, I want to put feedback on. So for those of you that have ever seen the pillowcase burrito, you know what's about to happen. Because I have everything stitched. So when I pull it to the right side, it's all done. So there and there. No hand sewing. Isn't that awesome? Woohoo! So one of the reasons that I wanted to I know. It's not. Yeah, there's an interesting story about why the Fab Four instructions are so hit and miss, but I'm not going to talk about it here. But there is a reason that because sometimes you'll get the instructions there and they're fabulous, and sometimes you get the instructions that are like can't quite figure out what they're trying to tell me. Thank goodness for the pictures. But yeah, there's reasons. So if you get good instructions from the Fab Four, hang on to them because they'll cross over a lot. All right. All right. So another thing that I want to talk about, because as always, I'm quickly running out of time, and I am going to stitch this down real quick. Otherwise, it's going to make me bananas because I can't press it right now. So where's my left edge? Top stitching. But do not move the needle. Do not move the needle, Mickey. Don't do it. Oh. Don't move the needle. I'm just going to edge stitch this real quick. My handy left edge, top stitching forward. And get your threads out of the way. Do not do as I say, not as I do. Jolene, I just caught your name. I've been reading the text and I just caught your name. Jolene was in an event that I just did just the other day in the Adirondacks. So again, oh, you guys didn't want to see me. You wanted to see this. All right. So I just had to get that flat. Otherwise, it was going to make me crazy. All right. So another thing that I want to talk about is how to sew a concave to a convex. So when I have sleeves or even pattern pieces where you're trying to sew a concave to a convex. I took a bra making class a few years ago, and the little cup for the bra had a concave to a convex. And when I put it together, it wasn't laying right. And so I asked the instructor, it's like, so what did I do wrong? And she could not, she's looking at it and looking at it. And she was like, how, that doesn't even go in there. How did you even get that in there? Because I can sew a concave to a convex. That's how it was. So I completely sewed it wrong. I got it in where it wasn't supposed to fit, because once you can do a concave to a convex, you will be able to do it. So one of the things when you're doing this is you want to make sure that you have the right pieces to the right pieces. So this is where the marks come in. So the single marks are for the fronts of the pattern. So the front of your shirt, the front of the stuffed animal, the front of the purse, whatever. And then the double clips are on the back side of it. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these right sides together, right? But this is the what I call the bigger piece of fabric, because we've got the concave to the convex. So we want the bigger piece of fabric to be to the feed dogs. And again, this is another one of those wonderful Islander tricks. So I am going to come and put this into position. And this is going to be, oh, I want my foot back. This is going to be, this is a shoulder seam. So this is a 3/8 inch seam allowance because it's not enclosed. And it is going to be top stitched. So I'm going to come drop my foot down. Now I got nervous. Now all I'm going to do here is I'm just going to worry about getting to that first notch. So I'm just going to straighten this out and make sure that I'm in the first notch. And let me get closer here. I'm going to change my angle just a bit so my hand is not in your way so much. But I do need to be able to see. So now what I want to do is I want to come and get my next notch and line it up with the next notch here, which will be our centers, our seam. So when I line this up, you will see that I have a little bit of a concave to a convex here. So I'm going to reach my hand in. You can pin it, but I'm going to reach my hand in between, and I'm going to do this to that bottom layer of fabric. And I'm going to make it nice and even. So can you see how I got that even? And then I'm going to come and get the next two little marks. And I'm going to do the same thing. Here you can really see it. Get this little knot that's going on here. So here you can really see it with the concave to the convex. And so here I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to grab this and scooch that bottom layer in. Straighten this up a bit. Come in and you'll see me pull that bottom layer in. So see that, watch. And I'm just going to stitch this again at a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. One of the things is and now I'm just going to come and meet to the end here. All right, so, oh my gosh, you're going to sew that without 6,000 pins. Yes. So, pins are one of those things, they are like a pacifier that are really doing your harm. So, it's not that you need to sew without pins, but when you put that many pins in, you're actually damaging the fabric, you're changing the pull of the weave, you're doing all the stuff that's contributing to the problem. So, I mean, I sew without pins, but I do not expect you to. So what you could do is you could pin where these first two marks are, pin where that next two marks are, pin where the last two marks are, and just try that. Because once you do that, you will find that you get this gorgeous sleeve, and there is no puckers, there's no pleats, there's no anything. It's just eased right in. So once you do this, and this is not a plucker, this is just a shadow. But once you do this and get a little practice doing this, you, like I said, you'll be able to do any concave to any convex that's out there. And it just is so pretty. It's just so pretty. Okay. All right, I'm going to show you a couple. I'm quickly running out of time, but let me show you a couple of more things. Some of you guys know about crimping curves. I was actually somewhere where at an event just recently where we were talking about gathering, and they started talking about crimping, which is different. So when it comes to scrunching up the fabric, there's a couple of ways to do it. One of them is a ruffle. So a ruffle will fold and pleat even. A gathering foot will gather, scrunch. And a crimping actually it's kind of manipulating the fabric to put more fabric in each little stitch to create a curve. And this is how, when I have these kind of curves, when I have these kind of curves where I have rounded, there's all these tools on the market that people will have developed over the years to try and get us to be able to get these nice pressed and stuff like that. And I still, if you like those, by all means, do it. This is just kind of one of those little tips that I like. And this is called crimping. And I first saw it on, I think it was Sandra Betsina back on HGTV back in the day. Now, one of the things that I do this, if you guys have the Husqvarna Viking with an IDT, we want to turn off the integrated dual foot. And if you want to go in and turn off, so it's a temporary setting, and I want to turn off the sensor foot lift. So I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to show why. So what I want is, when it comes to the Husqvarna Viking has a sensor system. So as it's sewing, you may not have even noticed it, but as it's sewing, it takes these little steps, and it's actually feeling the fabric. So if it needs to go up and down and stuff like that. Also, when you drop the needle, it will put up the foot just to the pivot point, which is not what I want in this situation. I want the fabric to stay put. Because what I'm going to do is I am going to come around here, and when I get to the curve, I'm going to push my fabric to the back. I am going to prevent it from feeding out of the presser foot. I'm playing kind of a reverse tug of war. It's pushing, I want to push back. And so I'm just going to come and just let it feed around this little corner. And then once I get to the straightaway again, I will ease up. All right. Now the tempting thing here is to pull this out and smooth it out, but we don't want to do that. We're just going to take this right over to our ironing board, and look at this. Look how beautiful that is. So it's very, very quick and easy. You just go over and just give it a good press, and then you're ready to put it on and top stitch it down. Okay. All right. I know there's so much more I want to tell you about too. But when it comes to the weights, I said I would talk about the weights. There are all kinds of different weights to choose from. Your dealer will have some. There's DIYs on making your own. So this is a pattern weight that I got from a dealer, and it's pretty and it's nice and heavy. And when you set it down, it just sets down. These are called wiggle weights. These I've had for about a bazillion years, and they are kind of filled with buckshot. And there's all these sizes so that I can put them in all kinds of positions. This is a bacon grill press that I stole from my husband. So I just saw it in his little cooking things, and I put my name on it, and mine now. So that one I use for my denims and stuff like that because it is nice and heavy. But yeah, it's for bacon. But these are the I do use weights instead of pins when I lay things down. Pressing tools are also important. So the number one pressing tool that I have to have, and this is for crafts or clothes or whatever, is the clapper. So the clapper is something that looks like this, right? Without this attached. So if you don't do clothing, you can get by with just this. However, this is a clapper plus a point turner. Now, this is also a clapper versus a point turner, but they come in different sizes, as you can see. But what I want to do is I'm going to show you what they can do. So I'm just going to make a little corner here. So I'm going to sew this right quick. Now, I want to show you too about these marks and how handy these little marks come in handy. So I'm going to sew this at 1/4 of an inch. Normally it should be a 3/8, but for the sake of this, so you can see. So this is a 3/8. So what will happen is when I come down and my end seam gets close to this guy, that's my 3/8 mark. So now I can come and turn this back on because I do like my sensor. So now I can do the pivot and see if I'm at 3/8. One more stitch. So I'm going to line up that guy. And there's my perfect 3/8 of an inch. So let me do this. Oh, stop. I've got 5 more minutes and I got about another half hour of stuff to show you. So let me come up here and I'll show you what comes in so handy with this point turner and why it is so nice. Because I want to press this open. So what happens here is I can lay this right on here and now I can press right to the point. And I can come and press right to the point. And I use my point turners a lot because I can come right to the point. And because if you press it flat before you press it right side out, you're going to get an awesome, crisp seam. And what the clapper side does is, let me do this real quick because I want to show you this as well. So it's pretty rare too that even with that one I just did, but I'm going to show you this one just because I can do it faster. So when I come down to that 3/8, then I can turn my corner. Okay. One of the things when I have a fold like this, what do? We cut that corner off to prevent the bulk. I don't do that anymore. So I will press everything like I need to, but then when it comes to folding it over, I will fold this over. So I press it open first and then get this and fold this along the seam line and then fold this along the seam line and come and pinch this through. But what that does is it creates this, everything lays flat. There is no bulky bulk in there. So I get a nice corner seam and everything lays flat rather than trying to trim it and get stuff to fit into that corner. Okay. But what the clapper part does is this base part is, I have to tell you the story because the first time I saw a clapper, I was like, or they talked about a clapper, I ran out and bought a clapper and it was just this base part and I was pressing and I was beating the crap out of my fabric and I was putting holes in it and I'm like, I don't get what this is doing. So then I was watching a sewing show and she goes, and this is the clapper. It does not mean you beat your fabric. So the clapper is not for beating the fabric. What you do is you hit it with a blast of steam, you set this down, and it'll pull the excess moisture out of the fabric. So it'll leave you with super crisp points, seams, etc. It is awesome. You want to put military pleats into somebody's pants? The clapper is how you do it. So I would love to go on and on and on because there's just tons of stuff I'd just love to show you. But we are out of time. But one thing I will say before we go is one of my favorite tips too is magnets instead of buttons. So I saw a pea coat with magnets instead of buttons, about 10 years ago. And I've done that. Not on everything, but on some things where I want to embellish. So there's magnets instead of buttons. So here I did magnets instead of buttons as well. So I could embroider here. So there's just magnets instead of buttons. So that is really cool as well. So the next Husqvarna Viking live is Wednesday, September 20th at 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central with Educator Meredith McClanahan sharing some great embroidery tips and tricks. So, and the next My Sewnet Live is Wednesday, September 13th with yours truly at 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central. And I will be showing you how to do embossing. So what embossing is if you've ever seen those towels with the fonts and everything smushed around, and the font sticks out, that's what we're going to be doing. So I hope to see you guys then. I really appreciate you coming. I will peruse the comments for the next few days. So if there's questions that you forgot to ask, please ask. And I will also get to anything that may have been missed. So thank you again for coming. I really appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all soon. Bye.